The parched earth cracked beneath Opal Newman's feet as she stumbled toward the lone well standing like a mirage on the horizon. 3 days without proper food and only sips of brackish water had left her dizzy, her once vibrant blue dress now dirt-stained and hanging from her diminished frame. The wagon train she'd been traveling with had been attacked by bandits outside of Copper Creek, Arizona Territory, in the sweltering summer of 1876, leaving her the sole survivor hidden beneath an overturned wagon as the outlaws plundered everything of value before riding off. Opal's vision blurred as she reached the stone well, her trembling hands grasping the rough edges for support. She fumbled with the rope, desperate to draw water, but her strength had abandoned her. The world tilted sideways as her knees buckled. The last thing she remembered was the sensation of falling and the distant sound of approaching hoofbeats before darkness claimed her. Yorick Ellison had been tracking a small herd of wild mustangs when he spotted the woman in blue crumpling beside his well. He spurred his paint stallion forward, dust billowing behind them as they raced across the sun-baked terrain. By the time he reached her, she was unconscious, her breathing shallow, face pale as moonlight against the red Arizona dirt. Miss, can you hear me?" Yorick knelt beside her, gently brushing strands of auburn hair from her face. She didn't stir. Without hesitation, he lifted her into his arms, surprised at how little she weighed. Her skin burned with fever and her lips were cracked from dehydration. Yorick settled her carefully across his saddle before mounting up behind her, one arm holding her securely against his chest. "Hold on, miss," he murmured, though he knew she couldn't hear him. "Drink and live beside me, just hold on." His ranch was less than 2 miles away, a modest spread he'd built with his own hands after returning from the war. As they approached the whitewashed cabin with its wide front porch, Yorick called out to his ranch hand, "Manuel, need some help here." Manuel Rodriguez emerged from the barn, dropping the harness he'd been repairing when he caught sight of the unconscious woman. "Dios mío, what happened?" "Found her collapsed at the north well. She's in a bad way. Fetch some clean water and tell Eliza to prepare a bed." Manuel nodded, rushing toward the cabin to alert Eliza, the housekeeper Yorick had hired last year when his sister moved back east to Philadelphia. By the time Yorick carried Opal into the house, Eliza had already turned down the bedsheets in the spare room and was heating water on the stove. "Poor thing," Eliza murmured as Yorick laid Opal gently on the bed. The older woman's experienced hands quickly assessed the situation. "Dehydration for certain, likely starving too. She's burning up. We need to cool her down and get some water into her little by little." Yorick stepped back, feeling suddenly awkward in the small bedroom. At 32, he'd lived alone or with other men most of his life, first in the army and then on his ranch. Having a beautiful woman under his roof stirred feelings he'd long suppressed. "I'll check if there's any sign of others," he said, backing toward the door. "She must have come from somewhere." Eliza nodded absently, already focused on loosening Opal's dress to make her more comfortable. "Send Manuel for the doctor if you can find him. She'll need proper medicine." For the next 3 days, Opal drifted in and out of consciousness. Eliza stayed by her side, spooning water and broth between her parched lips. The doctor, when he finally arrived, confirmed what they already suspected: severe dehydration and exhaustion, complicated by exposure to the harsh elements. "She's young and appears strong," the doctor told Yorick as they stood on the porch. "With proper care, she should recover, but it will take time." Yorick found himself checking on her multiple times each day, standing in the doorway as Eliza tended to her needs. Something about the woman's delicate features and the vulnerability of her situation stirred his protective instincts. On the 4th morning, Yorick was sipping coffee at his kitchen table when Eliza bustled in with an empty bowl. "She's awake," Eliza announced, a smile brightening her weathered face, "and asking questions. Might be good for you to speak with her, explain how she came to be here." Yorick set down his cup, suddenly nervous. "What's her name?" "Opal Newman, that's all she's told me so far." "Says she remembers the well. Then nothing until waking here. Nodding, Yorick ran a hand through his dark hair, wishing he'd taken time to shave that morning. He knocked softly on the bedroom door before entering. Opal was propped up against the pillows, her auburn hair loose around her shoulders. Though still pale, color had returned to her cheeks, and her eyes, a startling shade of green, were alert and wary as they tracked his entrance. "Miss Newman," Yorick said, remaining near the door to avoid frightening her. "I'm Yorick Ellison. This is my ranch. I found you collapsed at my well a few days ago." Recognition flickered in her eyes. "You carried me." Yorick nodded, feeling heat rise to his face at the memory of her in his arms. "You were in a bad way. Doctor says you're improving, though." Opal's fingers twisted in the sheet covering her lap. "The wagon train. I was traveling to Tucson. There were bandits." Her voice cracked. "Everyone else, they didn't make it." "I'm sorry," Yorick said softly. "We've sent word to the marshal in Copper Creek. He'll want to speak with you when you're stronger." A tear slipped down her cheek, and Yorick fought the unexpected urge to wipe it away. Instead, he cleared his throat awkwardly. "You're welcome to stay here as long as needed, until you're recovered and have made arrangements." "Thank you, Mr. Ellison. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." "No need for repayment, Miss Newman. Anyone would have done the same." But as he left the room, Yorick knew that wasn't entirely true. The Arizona Territory in 1876 was still wild, lawless in places. Not everyone would take in a stranger, particularly not a woman with no apparent connections or means to support herself. Over the next week, Opal's strength gradually returned. Eliza had found her some simple dresses that belonged to Yorick's sister, and though they were a bit large, they served until her own clothing could be properly laundered and mended. One evening, Yorick returned from checking his herd to find Opal sitting on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. Her hair was braided simply down her back, and she'd wrapped a shawl around her shoulders against the cooling air. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, joining her after a moment's hesitation. Opal nodded. "I've never seen anything like it. Back in Missouri, the sunsets were pretty, but not like this. Everything here feels bigger somehow." "That's the territory for you. Makes a person feel small, but not in a bad way." Yorick leaned against the porch railing, studying her profile. In the golden light, she looked stronger, more present than she had since arriving. "Eliza says you've been helping in the kitchen." A smile curved Opal's lips. "She's been teaching me to make tortillas. I'm afraid mine look more like maps of unknown territories than proper circles." Yorick laughed, surprised by the sound. It had been a long time since laughter came easily to him. "I'm sure they taste fine all the same." They fell into a comfortable silence, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "I should be making plans," Opal said finally. "I can't impose on your hospitality forever." "You're not imposing," Yorick replied quickly. "Besides, the doctor says you need more time to fully recover." "Even so, I need to figure out what comes next. I was heading to Tucson to take a position as a schoolteacher. My father arranged it before he passed last winter. Now I don't even have the letter of introduction." "Everything was in my trunk." Yorick considered this. "The school year won't start for another month at least. There's time to write to Tucson, explain what happened. I could ride into town tomorrow, send a telegram for you." Hope brightened her eyes. "Would you? That would be a tremendous help." "Of course. In the meantime, you're welcome here. My ranch isn't much, but it's peaceful, it's lovely," Opal said sincerely. "I've never lived anywhere so open. Our farm in Missouri was nestled in a valley surrounded by trees. You couldn't see more than a mile in any direction." "Do you miss it?" She considered the question. "I miss the people, my parents, our neighbors, but after Father died and the farm was sold to pay his debts, there wasn't much left to miss. Mother had passed years earlier." Her voice softened. "I'm alone now." The simple statement hung between them, resonating with Yorick more deeply than she could know. Since his return from the war and his sister's departure east, loneliness had been his constant companion, despite Manuel and Eliza's presence on the ranch. I understand something about being alone, he said finally. It's why I came west after the war, thought I'd find something out here in all this space. And did you? Opal asked, her gaze direct now, studying him with interest. Yorick looked out over his land, considering. Found peace, I suppose, independence, but not quite what I was looking for. What were you looking for? The question was innocent, but it struck Yorick like a physical blow. What had he been seeking all these years? I'm not entirely sure anymore, he admitted. Purpose, maybe. A reason for having survived when so many didn't. Opal nodded as if his answer made perfect sense. I felt that way after Mother died. I was only 14, and it seemed so unfair that I should continue while she was gone. What changed? Time passed, she said simply. And Father reminded me that living fully was the best way to honor those who couldn't. Yorick considered her words as the night deepened around them. There was wisdom in them that belied her youth. How old are you, Miss Newman, if you don't mind my asking? 22 last month. And please call me Opal. After all, you've seen me at my worst already. A smile tugged at his lips. Opal, then, and I'm Yorick to everyone except the banker in town who insists on formality. Their conversation was interrupted by Eliza calling them in for supper. As they rose to go inside, Yorick impulsively offered Opal his arm. She hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in the crook of his elbow, the gesture feeling oddly right, as if they'd done it 100 times before. The next morning, Yorick rode into Copper Creek with a list of tasks. First was sending Opal's telegram to the school board in Tucson, explaining her situation and inquiring if the position was still available. Next, he visited the marshal's office to check on the investigation into the wagon train attack. Marshal Davis was a grizzled veteran of both the Mexican-American War and the Civil War, with sharp eyes that missed little. We found the site, he told Yorick, pushing a wanted poster across his desk. Looks like the work of the Reeves gang. They've been hitting travelers between here and Tucson for months now. Yorick studied the image of Jeremiah Reeves, a hard-faced man with cold eyes. Any survivors besides Miss Newman? None that we found. 7 graves dug near the site, likely by the gang before they left. Unusual for them to bother, but maybe they're developing a conscience. The marshal's tone suggested he doubted it. How is the young lady faring? Better, recovering her strength. She's hoping to still take up her teaching position in Tucson. The marshal nodded slowly. Good for her. Terrible business, losing everyone like that. She's lucky you found her when you did. Yorick finished his errands purchasing supplies, mailing letters, and picking up a package of books his sister had sent from Philadelphia. As an afterthought, he stopped at the general store and purchased a blue ribbon that reminded him of the color of Opal's dress when he'd found her. It was a small thing, but he thought it might cheer her. The ride back to the ranch took him past the north well where he'd found Opal. He dismounted, examining the ground around it. The signs of her collapse were long gone, erased by wind and the occasional passing animal, but he could still picture her there, vulnerable and alone. The memory strengthened his resolve to help her rebuild her life, whatever form that might take. When he returned to the ranch, he found Opal in the kitchen garden with Eliza, harvesting tomatoes and peppers for dinner. She wore a simple cotton dress with her hair tied back, and though still thin, she moved with more energy than before. She waved when she saw him, a genuine smile lighting her face. "Any news?" she asked as he approached, wiping her hands on her apron. Yorick nodded. "Telegram's been sent. We should hear back in a few days, and I picked up a few things in town." He handed her the parcel with the ribbon, suddenly feeling foolish. "Nothing special, just thought you might find it useful." Opal untied the brown paper, her expression softening when she saw the blue ribbon. "It's lovely," she said, running her fingers over the satin. "Thank you." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of the growing connection neither had anticipated. Yorick cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "Marshall says they found the wagon train site. It was the Reeves gang, as they suspected." Opal's smile faded. "And the others?" buried near the site. "I'm sorry, Opal," she nodded, blinking back tears. "I knew, really, they wouldn't have left anyone behind." She took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "At least they were laid to rest properly, that's something." Yorick marveled at her resilience. Many would have been broken by what she'd endured, yet here she stood, facing her grief with quiet dignity. "You're stronger than you look," he said softly. A sad smile touched her lips. "Not always, but what choice is there? Life continues with or without our permission." That evening after dinner, as had become their custom, they sat on the porch watching the stars emerge. Opal had used the blue ribbon to tie back her hair, and Yorick felt an irrational surge of pleasure seeing her wear it. "Tell me about your ranch," Opal said, breaking the comfortable silence. "How did you come to be here?" Yorick stretched his legs out before him, considering how to answer. "After the war, I fought for the Union. I drifted west. Didn't have much waiting for me back in Pennsylvania. Worked as a ranch hand for a few years, saved every penny. When this place came up for sale, I took a chance. It was brave to start over in a new place." Yorick shook his head. "Not brave, necessary. The war changed me, changed everyone who lived through it. Coming west felt like the only way forward." "And your family?" "Just my sister Elizabeth now. Our parents passed before the war. Elizabeth lived with me for a time, but the territory was too rough for her liking. She returned to Philadelphia 2 years ago, married a banker's son last spring." "You must miss her." "I do," Yorick admitted, "but she writes often. Sends books she thinks I should read." He gestured to the package he'd collected in town. "Latest shipment arrived today. You're welcome to them when I'm finished." Opal's face brightened. "I'd like that. I've always loved reading, though opportunities were limited in Missouri. Father believed education was important for girls as well as boys." "He sounds like a forward-thinking man." "He was," Opal said, her voice warm with memory. "It's why he arranged the teaching position for me. He knew I'd need to support myself after he was gone." Yorick studied her profile in the fading light. "You'll make a fine teacher." "If the position is still available," she reminded him, a note of worry in her voice. "If not in Tucson, then somewhere else," Yorick assured her. "Teachers are needed throughout the territory." Even here in Copper Creek, the question surprised him. "The town's growing. They have a schoolhouse, but last I heard, the teacher was an older gentleman considering retirement." "Why?" Opal shrugged, suddenly seeming shy, "just wondering about options, in case Tucson falls through." The idea of Opal remaining in Copper Creek, close enough to visit regularly, sent an unexpected thrill through Yorick. But he tempered his reaction, reminding himself that her future was her own to decide. "Options are good," he said neutrally, "and you've time to consider them all." The next morning, Yorick had to ride out early to check on a broken section of fence reported by one of his ranch hands. By the time he returned mid-afternoon, he found the house unusually quiet. Manuel informed him that Eliza had gone to visit her daughter in town, who was expecting a baby any day. "And Miss Newman?" Yorick asked, trying to sound casual. Manuel grinned knowingly. "In the house, I believe. She was baking bread when I came from the stables an hour ago." Yorick removed his hat, brushing dust from his clothes before entering the house. The aroma of fresh bread filled the kitchen, but Opal wasn't there. Instead, he found her in the small room he used as an office, standing before the bookshelf with one of his volumes open in her hands. "Find something interesting?" he asked from the doorway. Opal startled, nearly dropping the book. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have been snooping." "It's not snooping if you have permission," Yorick said, moving into the room, "and you're welcome to any of the books." She relaxed, showing him the volume, a collection of poetry by Walt Whitman. "I've never read his work before. It's beautiful but so different from anything I've encountered. Whitman understands something about America, I think, the contradictions, the vastness of it." Yorick came closer, looking over her shoulder at the page. "I am large, I contain multitudes." That line always struck me. "Do you think it's true, that we all contain multitudes?" Yorick considered her question seriously. "I think we're all more complicated than we appear on the surface. War taught me that." Men I thought I knew completely revealed entirely new sides of themselves under pressure. "And you?" Opal asked, turning to face him. They were standing closer than propriety strictly allowed, but neither moved away. "What multitudes do you contain, Yorick Ellison?" The directness of her gaze made his heart beat faster. Nothing so interesting as all that, just a man trying to make sense of his place in the world. "I think there's more to you than that," Opal said softly. "You saved my life, opened your home to a stranger. Those aren't the actions of a simple man. They're the actions of any decent person." "No," she insisted. "They're the actions of a good man, and those are rarer than you might think." Their eyes held, and Yorick felt the room grow smaller, more intimate. He could smell the faint lavender scent of her hair, see the light dusting of freckles across her nose from her days working in the garden. It would be so easy to lean down, to close the distance between them. The sound of hoofbeats outside broke the moment. Yorick stepped back, clearing his throat as he moved to the window. "Rider coming. Looks like someone from town." Opal closed the book carefully, returning it to the shelf. "I should check on the bread." She slipped past him, her skirts brushing his legs as she went. Yorick took a deep breath before heading out to greet the visitor. It was a messenger from the telegraph office in Copper Creek, bringing a reply from Tucson. Yorick thanked the young man, slipping him a coin for his trouble before returning to the house with the telegram. He found Opal removing a perfect loaf of bread from the oven, her face flushed from the heat. "News from Tucson," he said, holding up the telegram. Opal set the bread aside, wiping her hands nervously on her apron. "What does it say?" Yorick unfolded the paper, scanning the brief message. "The position has been filled," he said, watching her face fall. "But they offer another opportunity assistant to the primary teacher, with the possibility of taking over a class of your own next term once they've had time to assess your abilities." Relief washed over Opal's features. "So I still have a position, if you want it. They ask when you might arrive." Opal sank into a kitchen chair, emotions playing across her face: relief, uncertainty, and something that looked almost like regret. "I should go as soon as possible, I suppose, to make a good impression." Yorick nodded, ignoring the hollow feeling expanding in his chest. "I could arrange for you to travel with the next mail coach. It runs to Tucson twice weekly." "That would be kind, thank you." An awkward silence fell between them, filled with unspoken thoughts. Finally, Yorick folded the telegram and placed it on the table. "I'll check the schedule in town tomorrow." "Yorick," Opal began, then hesitated. "I don't know how to thank you properly for everything." "You don't need to thank me. I'm just glad you're well enough to move forward with your plans." But as he walked out to the stables, Yorick couldn't ignore the growing realization that he didn't want Opal to leave. In the short time she'd been at the ranch, she'd brought something to his life that had been missing for years: warmth, conversation, the simple pleasure of shared moments. The thought of returning to his solitary existence after she departed felt increasingly unbearable. That night, Eliza returned from town with news that her daughter had delivered a healthy baby boy. The celebration and excitement provided a welcome distraction, but when everyone had retired for the night, Yorick found himself unable to sleep. He sat on the porch long after midnight, watching the stars and trying to make sense of his tumultuous emotions. He was still there when Opal emerged, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. "Couldn't sleep either?" she asked, joining him on the porch swing. Yorick shifted to make room for her. "Too much on my mind, I suppose. About the ranch, among other things." He glanced at her profile, silvered by moonlight. "Are you excited about Tucson?" Opal's hands twisted in her lap. "I should be. It's what I planned, what Father wanted for me." "But," she sighed, the sound soft in the quiet night, "but I've come to feel at home here, with Eliza and Manuel and—" She trailed off, leaving the rest unsaid. "And me?" Yorick asked, his voice low. Opal nodded, not meeting his eyes. "It's foolish, I know. We've barely known each other 2 weeks." "Time isn't always the best measure of connection," Yorick said carefully. "Sometimes a person just fits into your life as if they were always meant to be there." Now she did look at him, her eyes searching his face. Is that how you feel? Yorick had never been a man of many words, preferring action to declaration. But in this moment, words were what mattered. Since you arrived, the ranch has felt more like home than it ever has before. The thought of you leaving. He shook his head, unable to complete the sentence. Ask me to stay, Opal whispered, the words barely audible. Yorick turned toward her, his heart hammering in his chest. What about your teaching position, your plans? There are children who need teaching in Copper Creek too, you said so yourself. Her hand found his in the darkness. Ask me, Yorick. He entwined his fingers with hers, marveling at how right it felt. Stay, Opal. Not as my guest or as someone I rescued, but because you want to. Because perhaps there could be something between us worth exploring. A smile spread across her face, luminous in the moonlight. Yes, she said simply. I'll stay. Yorick lifted their joined hands, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. I should speak to the marshal about that teaching position tomorrow. And I should write to Tucson, decline their offer properly. They sat together in comfortable silence, the future spreading before them like the vast Arizona sky full of possibility and promise. Yorick knew there would be challenges ahead, that their growing feelings would need time to mature, but for the first time since before the war, he felt hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Yorick spoke with Marshal Davis, who connected them with the town council. Copper Creek's aging schoolmaster was indeed eager to retire, and when he met Opal and reviewed her qualifications, he pronounced her an ideal replacement. The school term would begin in 3 weeks, giving her time to prepare. Meanwhile, Opal moved from the spare bedroom to a small cottage on Yorick's property, previously used for storage but quickly transformed into a cozy living space with help from Eliza and Manuel. The arrangement preserved propriety while allowing Opal to remain close. Their courtship progressed with a natural ease that surprised them both. Each evening, they would share a meal, sometimes at the main house with Eliza and Manuel, sometimes just the two of them at Opal's cottage. Afterward, they would walk the property, talking about their pasts, their hopes, their views on everything from politics to literature. Yorick found himself opening up about experiences he had never shared with anyone, the horrors he'd witnessed during the war, the guilt he carried for surviving when friends hadn't, the nightmares that still occasionally plagued him. Opal listened without judgment, offering comfort through her understanding and steady presence. In turn, she shared her own struggles, the grief of losing both parents, her fears about being alone in the world, her determination to build a meaningful life despite these challenges. Yorick admired her resilience, her quiet strength, and her capacity for joy despite everything she'd endured. As the start of the school term approached, the town organized a small gathering to introduce Opal to the families whose children she would be teaching. Yorick accompanied her, proud to stand at her side as she charmed parents and children alike with her warmth and obvious passion for education. You were wonderful, he told her as they rode back to the ranch that evening, the sunset painting the desert in gold and crimson. Those children are lucky to have you as their teacher. Opal smiled, her face glowing with excitement. There are 27 students enrolled from 6 years old to 17. It will be challenging, but I'm looking forward to it. I have no doubt you'll manage beautifully. Yorick hesitated, then added, I was thinking I might build some new bookshelves for the schoolhouse. The current ones looked rather worn. That would be lovely. Perhaps we could ask families to donate books as well. The selection was quite limited. Yorick nodded, already making plans in his mind. I could start this weekend, have them ready before classes begin. Always thinking of others, Opal said softly. It's one of the things I admire most about you. The compliment warmed him. As they approached the ranch, Yorick made a decision he'd been contemplating for days. Would you like to join me for a picnic tomorrow? There's a place about an hour's ride from here, a small spring with cottonwoods. It's cooler there and the view is magnificent. That sounds wonderful. Though I'm not much of a rider. We can take the wagon, Yorick assured her, and pack enough food for the whole day. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Yorick rose early, working with Manuel to prepare the wagon while Eliza packed a generous hamper of food. By mid-morning they were ready to depart. Opal emerged from her cottage wearing a fresh yellow dress that complemented her auburn hair, which she'd styled with the blue ribbon Yorick had given her. The sight of her, radiant in the morning light, took his breath away. "You look beautiful," he said as he helped her into the wagon. A blush colored her cheeks. "Thank you. It's a perfect day for an adventure." The journey to the spring passed quickly as they talked and enjoyed the scenery. The spot was just as Yorick had described, a small oasis of greenery in the arid landscape, with cottonwoods providing welcome shade and a clear spring bubbling up from the rocks to form a small pool before disappearing underground again. They spread a blanket beneath the largest tree, unpacking the food Eliza had prepared: fried chicken, corn bread, fresh tomatoes and cucumbers from the garden, and apple pie for dessert. As they ate, Yorick pointed out landmarks visible from their elevated position: distant mountains, the silver ribbon of a river, and far to the east, the faint outline of Copper Creek. "It's like sitting on top of the world," Opal marveled, leaning back on her hands to take in the panoramic view. "I never imagined such vastness existed before coming west." "It changes a person," Yorick agreed. "Makes you see your own life differently." After they'd eaten, they walked to the spring, removing their shoes to dangle their feet in the cool water. Dragonflies skimmed across the surface, and somewhere nearby, a mockingbird sang its varied repertoire. "I can't remember the last time I felt so at peace," Opal said, trailing her fingers through the water. Even before the wagon train attack, there was always worry about money, about the journey, about whether I was making the right choice. Yorick watched her, struck by how far she'd come from the unconscious woman he'd found at his well. And now? "Any regrets about staying in Copper Creek instead of continuing to Tucson?" She turned to him, her green eyes holding his gaze steadily. "Not a single one. Everything that happened, terrible as some of it was, led me here, to this place, to you." The simple sincerity of her words moved him deeply. Yorick reached out, gently tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low and serious, "about that day at the well, about carrying you home. What about it? I told you to drink and lie beside me. At the time, I meant it literally: drink the water, recover your strength. But now—" He took her hand in his, gathering his courage. "Now I find myself hoping you might consider making it a more permanent arrangement." Opal's eyes widened slightly. "Yorick, are you—" "I'm not rushing," he said quickly. "I know it's only been a short time, but I've never felt this way about anyone before, Opal. You've brought light back into my life, given me a reason to look forward to each new day. And if you need more time, I understand completely. I just wanted you to know where my heart stands." Tears welled in Opal's eyes, but her smile was radiant. "I don't need more time," she said, squeezing his hand. "I know what I feel. What we've found together is rare and precious, and I don't want to waste a moment of it." Yorick's heart soared. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished. But Opal met him halfway, their lips touching in a gentle, tentative kiss that quickly deepened into something more profound: a promise, a beginning. When they finally parted, Yorick rested his forehead against hers, overcome with emotion. "I love you, Opal Newman," he whispered. "I think I've loved you since the moment I found you at that well, though I didn't recognize it then." "And I love you, Yorick Ellison," she replied, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "My unexpected cowboy, my rescuer, my heart." They remained by the spring until late afternoon, talking, planning, sharing more kisses and dreams of a future together. By the time they loaded the wagon for the return journey, the foundations of their life together had been laid: a wedding after the harvest. The cottage expanded to accommodate a family, Opal teaching while Yorick managed the ranch. As they drove home in the golden light of sunset, Opal leaned against Yorick's shoulder, contentment radiating from her. "Do you believe in fate?" she asked. Yorick considered the question. I'm not sure. But I do believe that sometimes, the most unexpected turns in the road lead us exactly where we're meant to be. Like fainting at a well and being carried home by a handsome cowboy. There was laughter in her voice. Exactly like that, Yorick agreed, dropping a kiss on the top of her head. Exactly like that. The news of their engagement spread quickly through Copper Creek. Most received it with enthusiasm. The town's new school teacher and the respected rancher made a fine match in everyone's estimation. Marshall Davis offered to host the wedding supper at the hotel, while the ladies of the town began planning to help with preparations. Yorick wrote to his sister Elizabeth in Philadelphia, sharing his happiness and inviting her to come west for the wedding. Her reply came by telegraph less than a week later. Overjoyed stop will arrive October 1st with husband stop letter, follows stop congratulations dearest brother stop, as promised. Yorick built new bookshelves for the schoolhouse. And together he and Opal organized a book drive that resulted in nearly 100 volumes being donated to start a proper school library. The day before classes were to begin, they worked late into the evening arranging the books and preparing the classroom. Nervous about tomorrow? Yorick asked as they walked home under a canopy of stars. Opal nodded, her hand warm in his. A little. I want to do well by these children. For many of them, this might be their only chance at an education. You'll be wonderful, Yorick assured her. You have a gift for teaching. I've seen it when you work with Manuel's children. Indeed, Manuel's 2 young sons had taken to visiting Opal's cottage regularly, ostensibly to deliver fresh eggs or help in her small garden, but really to hear her read stories and learn the arithmetic she taught them through games. Their progress in just a few weeks was remarkable. Thank you for believing in me, Opal said, leaning into his side as they walked. It makes all the difference. Opal's first day of teaching exceeded even her optimistic expectations. The children were attentive and eager to learn, the parents supportive, and by the time the last student departed, she knew she had found her calling. She was tidying the classroom when Yorick appeared in the doorway, a bouquet of wildflowers in his hand. For the finest teacher in the Arizona Territory, he said, presenting them with a flourish. Opal accepted them with delight, burying her nose in the colorful blossoms. They're beautiful. Where did you find wildflowers this late in the season? I have my secrets, Yorick said with a wink, not admitting that he'd ridden nearly 15 miles to a sheltered canyon where summer blooms lingered longer. How was your first day? Wonderful. Opal's face glowed with enthusiasm as she recounted stories of her students, from shy 6-year-old Lucy, who had overcome her fears to read aloud, to 17-year-old Thomas, who had initially been reluctant but had shown unexpected aptitude for mathematics. Yorick listened, enchanted by her passion. I'm proud of you, he said when she finally paused for breath. You've overcome so much to reach this point. We both have, Opal replied, setting the flowers in a jar of water, and now we get to build something beautiful together. As autumn progressed, their lives fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings found them sharing coffee on Opal's porch before she departed for the school and Yorick for his daily ranch work. Evenings were spent together, planning their wedding, improving the cottage, or simply enjoying each other's company. On weekends, Yorick taught Opal to ride, starting with his gentlest mare. Though initially nervous, she proved a quick learner, and soon they were able to explore the ranch together on horseback. These excursions became treasured moments away from their responsibilities, time to connect and deepen their understanding of each other. As October approached, bringing cooler temperatures and the promise of Yorick's sister's visit, preparations for the wedding intensified. Eliza and the women of Copper Creek helped Opal create a wedding dress from fine fabric ordered from Tucson, while Yorick worked with the town carpenter to craft a beautiful bed frame from native mesquite wood as his wedding gift to his bride. Elizabeth and her husband Jonathan arrived as promised on the 1st of October, bringing trunks of gifts and news from the East. Elizabeth, a petite woman with Yorick's dark hair and observant eyes, embraced Opal immediately. "I knew from his letters that my brother was smitten," she told Opal as they walked through the ranch house, "but seeing you together confirms it. I haven't seen him this happy since before the war." "He's changed my life," Opal confided. "When he found me at that well, I had nothing, no family, no possessions, barely even hope. Now I have everything that matters." Elizabeth squeezed her hand. "You've given him just as much, I think. A reason to build a future, not just exist in the present." The wedding took place on a perfect autumn day, with the mountains providing a majestic backdrop to the ceremony held on Yorick's ranch. Marshal Davis, who possessed the authority to perform marriages, officiated with surprising eloquence. Opal wore her new dress, adorned with the blue ribbon in her hair for something blue, as tradition required. Yorick, usually most comfortable in ranch clothes, cut a handsome figure in a new suit ordered from Tucson. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, written together during evenings on the porch. As they exchanged rings, his a plain gold band, hers a delicate circle with a small sapphire that had belonged to Yorick's mother, many in the assembled crowd dabbed at tears. "I promise to stand beside you through all of life's joys and sorrows," Yorick said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes. "To build a home and a life worthy of the love we've found. To cherish and protect you, not because you need protection, but because you deserve to be cherished." Opal's voice trembled slightly as she responded. "I promise to walk with you as an equal partner in all things, to create with you a haven of love and understanding. To remind you, on the darkest days, of the light that resides within you, and to thank God every day for leading me to your well. By the authority vested in me by the territory of Arizona," Marshal Davis proclaimed after they had exchanged rings, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Yorick." Their kiss was met with cheers and applause from friends, neighbors, and Opal's students, who had been given a special holiday to attend the celebration. The wedding supper at the hotel afterward featured the best food Copper Creek could offer, music from local musicians, and dancing that continued well into the night. As the newlyweds departed in Yorick's wagon, decorated with ribbons and flowers by the schoolchildren, Opal leaned against her husband's shoulder, happier than she had ever imagined possible. "Mrs. Ellison," Yorick said, testing the sound of her new name, "how does it feel?" "Like coming home," Opal replied, looking up at the stars that had witnessed their journey from strangers to beloved partners. "Like I've finally found where I belong." Life as newlyweds brought adjustments for both Yorick and Opal, but their deep connection made the transition smoother than either had anticipated. The expanded cottage became their home, filled with books, music, and the shared artifacts of their growing life together. Yorick added a larger kitchen at Opal's request, and a covered porch where they continued their tradition of evening conversations. Opal's teaching career flourished as she implemented innovative methods that engaged even the most reluctant students. Parents noticed the difference in their children's enthusiasm for learning, and enrollment in the school steadily increased. By spring, the town council was discussing the need to hire an assistant teacher to help with the growing numbers, a development that filled Opal with pride and satisfaction. For Yorick, the ranch prospered under his careful management, allowing him to hire additional hands and expand his herd. The security this provided meant he could spend more time with Opal and contribute to community projects, including helping to establish Copper Creek's first lending library, which operated from a corner of the general store. Their first anniversary was celebrated with a return to the spring where Yorick had first confessed his love. As they shared a picnic similar to that memorable day, Opal had news of her own to share. "I visited Dr. Morgan yesterday," she said, a mysterious smile playing at her lips. "He confirmed what I've suspected for a few weeks now." Yorick looked at her questioningly, then understanding dawned. "Opal, are you saying?" She nodded, her eyes shining. "We're going to have a baby. In late November, the doctor thinks." Joy unlike anything Yorick had ever known surged through him. He gathered Opal in his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious treasure in the world, which to him she was. "A baby," he whispered against her hair. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Opal asked, though his reaction had already answered her question. "Beyond words," Yorick assured her, placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "I never imagined having a family of my own. After the war, I thought such ordinary happiness wasn't meant for me. And now I can't imagine any other life than the one we're building together." He kissed her tenderly. "You and our child are my everything, Opal, my reason for being." The months of Opal's pregnancy brought a new dimension to their relationship as they prepared for parenthood. Yorick became even more protective, insisting on driving Opal to and from school each day once her condition became apparent. For her part, Opal continued teaching until just weeks before her due date. Supported by the assistant teacher, the town had hired a young woman named Sarah who had recently arrived from Kansas. November brought early snows to the mountains and cold winds to Copper Creek. As Opal's time grew near, Yorick ensured that everything was in readiness. The cradle he had crafted from the same mesquite as their bed, tiny garments sewn by Eliza and the women of the town, a rocking chair positioned near the fireplace in their bedroom. On the night of November 25, 1877, Opal woke Yorick with a hand on his shoulder. "It's time," she said simply, her face calm despite the pain he could see in her eyes. The next hours were both the longest and most miraculous of Yorick's life. Eliza and the midwife, Mrs. Thornton, arrived quickly, sending him to pace in the main room of the cottage while they attended to Opal. Each cry from the bedroom pierced his heart, making him feel helpless in a way he hadn't experienced since the war. Shortly after dawn, as golden light began to filter through the windows, a new sound filled the cottage, the lusty cry of a newborn. Moments later, Mrs. Thornton appeared in the doorway, her face wreathed in smiles. "Congratulations, Mr. Ellison, you have a healthy daughter." Yorick followed her into the bedroom, where Eliza was helping Opal sit up against the pillows, a small bundle cradled in her arms. Despite the exhaustion evident on her face, Opal glowed with joy as she looked up at him. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Yorick approached the bed, overcome with emotion as he gazed down at the tiny face nestled against Opal's breast. The baby had a dusting of dark hair like his own, and when she briefly opened her eyes, he caught a glimpse of what looked like Opal's shade of green. "She's perfect," he whispered, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed and extending a tentative finger which the baby immediately grasped with surprising strength. Just like her mother, Opal smiled, leaning against him as he wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "What shall we name her?" We never did decide. They had discussed various options throughout the pregnancy, but had agreed to wait until they met their child before making a final decision. Now, looking at his daughter's face, Yorick knew. "Elizabeth Hope," he suggested. "After my sister, and because you brought hope back into my life." Tears filled Opal's eyes as she nodded. "Elizabeth Hope Ellison, it's beautiful." The baby, as if approving of her name, made a small, contented sound before drifting back to sleep in her mother's arms. The years that followed brought both challenges and immeasurable joy to the Ellison family. Elizabeth, called Ellie by everyone except her Aunt Elizabeth who visited from Philadelphia each summer, grew into a bright, curious child with her father's thoughtful nature and her mother's love of learning. When she was 3, a brother joined the family, Samuel Yorick Ellison, a sturdy boy with his mother's auburn hair and a disposition as sunny as the Arizona skies. Opal continued teaching until Samuel's birth, then took a 2-year respite before returning part-time, sharing duties with Sarah, who had become a close friend. This arrangement allowed Opal to balance her passion for education with her devotion to her family, while giving Sarah greater responsibility in preparation for eventually taking over as head teacher when Opal decided to retire. Yorick's ranch flourished, becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. His fair treatment of workers and honest business practices earned him respect throughout the territory, and he was twice elected to the town council, where he advocated for improvements in education and infrastructure. As their children grew, Yorick and Opal made sure they understood the remarkable circumstances that had brought their parents together. The well where Yorick had found Opal became a special place for family picnics, a tangible reminder of how a moment of crisis had led to a lifetime of love. "Tell us the story again, Papa," Ellie would request as they sat beneath a cottonwood tree Yorick had planted near the well, and Yorick would begin, his voice warm with memory. "I was tracking wild horses when I saw a beautiful woman in a blue dress collapse beside this very well." "And you carried her home," Samuel would interject excitedly. "I did. I told her to drink and lie beside me, and she did." Both children would chorus, "She did indeed," Yorick would agree, meeting Opal's eyes over their children's heads. "The best decision either of us ever made." On their 10th wedding anniversary, as they stood together on the porch of their home, no longer a cottage, but a comfortable ranch house that had grown with their family, Yorick presented Opal with a small wooden box he had crafted himself. "What's this?" she asked, turning the beautifully carved object in her hands. "Open it and see." Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a silver locket. When Opal opened it, she found a tiny painting of the well on one side and their family, Yorick, Opal, Ellie, and Samuel on the other. "It's exquisite," she breathed, touching the miniature images with a gentle finger. "Who painted these?" "A traveling artist who passed through Copper Creek last month. I commissioned it specially." Yorick fastened the locket around her neck, pressing a kiss to the spot where it rested. "To remind you always of our beginning and what we've built together." Opal turned in his arms, her eyes shining with the same light that had captivated him from the moment she first truly saw him. "As if I could ever forget. You saved my life in more ways than one, Yorick Ellison." "And you saved mine," he replied, drawing her close. "By fainting at my well, by accepting my invitation to stay, by building this beautiful life with me." As the Arizona stars appeared above them, Yorick and Opal stood wrapped in each other's arms, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together and the love that had sustained them through every challenge and triumph. From the desperate moment at her remote well to the rich, full life they now shared, their journey had been one of unexpected blessings and profound joy. Inside the house, their children slept peacefully, dreams of their own adventures yet to come filling their young minds. Outside, the desert stretched vast and beautiful around their home, a testament to the frontiers, both external and internal, that Yorick and Opal had crossed together. "Drink and lie beside me," Yorick whispered, echoing the words that had started their story. "Always," Opal promised, sealing their renewed vow with a kiss as enduring as the love they had found in the wild heart of the West.